Before we get started, let's go ahead and get this part out of the way. Kate Beckinsale in leather. Okay, now that we've got that viewing point out of the way, we can move on to the rest of the review. Let's talk about a movie I watched. I finally watched. I don't know if you've ever been to my channel's main page, but there's a section with one movie review in it right now. I've not had a lot of time to watch movies. It's so sad. It hurts my feelings. But I did finally buckle down, stay up really stupid late, and watch, a high quality one. Underworld, Blood Wars. Now, for those of you who don't know, Underworld Blood Wars is the Underworld film that came out in January of this year. And as most of you are probably aware, January is the dumping ground. The dumping ground for studios to just kind of dump films they don't have anywhere else to put. And let me preface this with a confession. If you've not heard me say this before, you'll probably hear me say this again. I have a soft spot for lower budgeted, semi-schlocky, sci-fi action fantasy films. I always have. I mean, I am a man of a certain age, and I grew up watching schlock flicks like Full Moon Movies put out, and Canon Pictures, and New Empire. No, just Empire. And I grew up watching schlocky stuff, really cheap movies, and I have a soft spot for movies that are more ambitious than their limitations will allow them to be. And to me, Underworld Blood Wars was one of those films. Was it a good movie? Well, see, the thing about subjective art is good is dependent upon what you like and what you're looking for. So we'll talk about what it is, and then maybe whether or not you'll like it. So what it is. Underworld is part 5 of the Underworld saga. It is part 4 of the character Kate Beckinsale plays, Celine, her storyline. The way the first one started out, you had the first one, and the second one kind of wrapped the story up, and the third one acted as a prequel to the first film, kind of rounding that story. So when they decided to come out with part 4, they basically started a new trilogy. And this is the second of that proposed trilogy. Awakenings was the semi-sequel / reboot, and Awakenings was a very jarring film. The reception to it wasn't that great, even though it wasn't terrible. But you had, and for the record, if you've not seen the first Underworld, I highly recommend it. It's an entertaining movie. Some of the best werewolf and vampire action you'll ever see. A lot of the effects are not CG. There's CG in it, obviously, but a lot of the special effects are done practically. Len Wiseman, the director, really pushed hard to have that. And forgive me if I go down a rabbit trail and never come back. I know I have a tendency to do that. I feel like I'm kind of in that mood right now, so I may do that. Forgive me. But moving on, it's a good movie. It's very practical effects driven. It's rather gory for those of you who might be squeamish. Most of you guys probably aren't. But back at Awakenings. Awakenings was a very jarring film because, without trying to give away too many spoilers, she basically wakes up in the future, and the story and the dynamics of the story and the motivations have changed dramatically from what they originally were in the original trilogy. And so a lot of people didn't like that because, and I didn't care for it either, if I can be quite honest, because I liked the dynamics of the original 3. So you have the continuing story of Celine. The official synopsis is this: the next installment in the blockbuster franchise, Underworld Blood Wars, follows vampire death dealer Celine as she fends off brutal attacks from both the Lycan clan and the vampire faction that betrayed her. With only her allies, David, and his father Thomas, she must stop the eternal war between Lycans and vampires, even if it means she has to make the ultimate sacrifice. That's more or less the synopsis. And may I say that Charles Dance plays the father, and Charles Dance is always awesome. Theo James plays David. The cast is actually fairly solid. The story is semi-entertaining. I tell you what really, really hurts this movie almost to the point of death is the editing. The editing in this movie was so bad. I mean, even points of exposition where people just need to talk to each other. I mean, they are popping at a clip, and you're just like, whoa, 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 just take a breath, stop. And I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I guess they were like, they think that we're all riddled with ADD and we can't watch something for more than 3 minutes if there aren't 100 cuts in those 3 minutes. But it just really blazes through, and it's really very distracting, honestly. I mean, for anybody that would start getting invested in the story, the editing just starts ripping it away from you. The short version is, if you like this series, I feel like you'll like this movie. I really do. Because it is more in the vein of the original films, more and less Awakenings, which primarily had her going up against humans. If you are not invested in this series, I seriously doubt this will change your mind. If you've never seen this series, the first one is really good, and they, quality-wise, kind of all go downhill from there. They really do. I remember when 2 came out, it was one of the most disappointing sequels I had seen. Now, I feel like if I watched it again, I may be a little more forgiving, but originally when I watched it, I just hated it. Hate's too strong a word. I really was just very disappointed. Like Matrix Reloaded disappointed. It was just that underwhelming. But the first one is always worth a watch, and like I said, if you've never seen it, give them a go. You might enjoy all of them, especially if you like fantasy, vampire, werewolf. Basically, I mean, these movies are constructed from comic book writers and comic book fans, so it has a huge comic feel to it. So I'd say if that interests you, give it a go. If that kind of stuff doesn't interest you, avoid at all costs. Now, as for me, I like that stuff. I do. I like fantasy. I like comic book films. Like I said, this movie, if you've seen it and you didn't like it and you're like, the CGI was meh, this movie was filmed on a $35 million budget. Now, some of you guys may not know that is cheap. I mean, that's so cheap that I wonder how they even did it. I'm amazed at, because I mean, you could tell that they had a limited budget and they were really trying to reach past what they had. I'm always impressed with guys that can pull so much out of so little. And this is one of those films where it's like, yeah, but I really felt like, God, it just disappoints me because I feel like this movie had so much more potential. And I feel like there's like 15 minutes of this movie on a cutting room floor somewhere where they were trying to get it down to that magic 90-minute spot. I mean, do we even care about that anymore? In the day and age of Netflix binging, do we really need that to be an hour and a half? Food for thought. A lot of guys do this just to get more screenings in the theaters on a day. But, I mean, have we not moved past that? Because I feel like we have. I know I've been past it, like way past it. Seems like an hour and 45 minutes is really that magic spot. It's not too long, but it's not trying to just cut it short, all the way. So anyway, there's my review for a movie I finally watched, Underworld Awakenings. Comment down below if you've seen this movie, if you've seen the series, what you think about it, if you're going to try to watch it. And if you do try to watch it, come back here, post a comment, and let me know if you hate me or if you love me.